The Apex Institute of Unified Intelligence, or just Apex if you were cool enough to pretend you didn't care, was less of a school and more of a cosmic Hunger Games disguised as a university. Located on Gliese 9, a moon bathed in a perpetual mauve sky and dusted with academic arrogance, Apex was where the galaxy's elite sent their spawn to become even more intolerable. Its buildings shimmered in the chromatic hues of wealth, legacy, and bureaucracy, tall towers, self-cleaning walls, and AI-powered everything. You couldn't sneeze without an automated drone offering you a hypoallergenic tissue and a lecture on etiquette. It wasn't just the most prestigious institution in the Andromeda Convergence. It was also the most unapologetically brutal. And Kaela of Emberis was dying in it, at least metabolically speaking. Kaela was the first of her kind ever admitted to Apex. The Emberians were a relatively new entrant to the galactic scene, molten-skinned beings whose bodies required trace metal compounds to synthesize energy. Instead of carbohydrates, they consumed mineral-rich sustenance. Their homeworld, Emberis Prime, was a volatile, volcano-laced planet orbiting a red hypergiant. Their immune systems were nightmares for bacteria. Their metabolisms could run on iron shavings and sand if needed. But Apex's cafeteria served Nutriform, a generic protein mush designed by the Dravari-dominated Board of Nutritional Science. Nutriform had one small flaw. It was mildly poisonous to Emberians. Not catastrophically so, just enough to slowly starve Kaela to death while the institution blamed her failure to adapt. She sat alone in the mess hall every day, quietly pushing the beige sludge around with a vibrating spoon. Her fingers, usually a glowing burnt orange, had faded to a dull, sickly gold. The radiant markings along her collarbone flickered weakly like dying embers. She'd filed 3 formal complaints with Apex's administration. Each was returned with an auto-generated reply. Per subsection 5.1 of the Apex Code, all students must demonstrate physiological adaptability. Nutritional challenges are considered a rite of integration. Exceptions will not be made for emerging species. Translation: suck it up, glowy. At the next table over, Crass Vitur, the 3-time valedictorian of smugness and self-appointed alpha of the Dravari clique, leaned back in his gravity-defying hover chair. His chrome-dappled scales caught the overhead light with dramatic flourish. He clicked his tongue against his inner mandibles and sneered. "Look," Crass said loudly, jabbing a claw toward Kaela without even trying to be subtle. The Emberians still trying to digest her misery. I give it 2 more cycles before she files for species reclassification as a fossil. Laughter rippled from the Dravari table, all high-pitched hissing and smug, glinting scales. Selah, Crass's number 2 in both rank and cruelty, added with a flutter of her dorsal fronds, "Honestly, why are we even letting her in? Her kind still use flame pits for heating. What next? Admitting methane breathers with dietary rights." Kaela heard it all. She always did. But today, she didn't cry. That had stopped 2 weeks ago. Today, she simply stared at her tray and quietly calculated how many more days she could function before losing muscle control. 3, maybe. At the opposite end of the cafeteria, something shifted. The doors parted with a hiss, and in walked Jet Sorrin, the lone human at Apex. If Kaela was a curiosity, Jet was a cosmic punchline. Humanity had only joined the Convergence 20 standard years ago, and already their reputation preceded them. Impulsive, sarcastic, painfully emotional, and weirdly hard to kill. Apex admitted Jet as part of a diplomatic experiment. That's how the administration phrased it. "Observe the primitive mammal," Crass often joked. "Watch it perform empathy. It's like a zoo, but more self-righteous." Jet had noticed Kaela before, sitting alone, wasting away slowly and silently. But he hadn't intervened. Not yet. He had his own baggage to unpack, his own quota of ridicule to endure. Besides, humans were still considered a test species at Apex. One wrong move, and he could be de-admitted and repackaged as a cautionary tale. But that day, something snapped. It wasn't the starvation. It wasn't even Kaela's flickering vitals. It was Crass and his loud, scaly smugness. laughing with his mouth full of privilege and synth protein. Jet detoured from his usual route and, to the collective horror of half the cafeteria, walked straight toward Kaela's table. She blinked up at him, her eyes pale blue and dim, the glow around her irises barely present. "Mind if I sit?" Jet asked. Kaela hesitated. "You are human." "Guilty," Jet said with a grin, plopping his tray down. "Why sit here?" she asked. "The others avoid me. I'm not optimal." Jet unwrapped his sandwich with surgical calm. "Because the others are jerks. And because I've seen you eat nothing for 3 weeks, which I assume means you're not staging a silent protest against flavor." Kaela blinked slowly, unsure if this was sarcasm or a malfunctioning social ritual. The Nutriform contains calcium boronates. Emberians cannot absorb energy from it. It is like drinking rocks. "Well," Jet said, reaching into his pack, "then maybe it's time we break the food chain." He pulled out a vacuum-sealed container. Kaela leaned back, confused. Jet opened it with a satisfying pop. Inside, dried mangoes, almond clusters, strips of real meat. "Earth food." Kaela inhaled. Her nostrils flared. "That smells edible. No boronates." "I checked. Just vitamin-rich, grandma packed, borderline illegal in this galaxy nutrition. Want some?" Kaela stared at him. "You would share food with me?" Jet shrugged. "Back home, we call that being a decent person." "Shocking, I know." Across the room, Krass's fronds twitched with rage. "Unbelievable," he hissed. "Now they're forming alliances." Kaela slowly picked up a dried mango strip. She bit and glowed. Not metaphorically, actual, pulsing bioluminescent glow spread from her temples to her chest. Her eyes lit up like twin embers reigniting after weeks in ash. "This is compatible," she whispered, wonder in her voice. Jet smirked. "Glad you approve. Want to try peanut butter next?" The next day at lunch, the world did not end. But for some students at the Apex Institute, it might as well have. Kaela, the once fading Emberian, now sat upright, glowing softly from the molecular miracle that was peanut butter. Her posture had changed, less abandoned lab rat, more sentient being with mitochondria that worked. And sitting across from her, leaning back with a satisfied crunch of celery stick, was Jet Sorrin, the human who had done the unthinkable. He had fed the wrong alien. And now the cafeteria was on fire. Not literally. Apex's anti-combustion drones would never allow that. But socially? Absolutely flaming. Krass V. Tur, Apex's beloved golden boy and poster child for evolution without introspection, stared across the room like someone had defecated on his ancestry. Again, his cold-blooded glare was locked on Jet and Kaela's table as if eyeballs could revoke scholarships. He wasn't alone. The entire Dravari table had gone into full-body offense mode. Their scales shimmered with the iridescent hues of hostility, blue streaks down the spine, red flickers along the jawline, and most damning, an absence of gold. That was the Dravari version of a middle finger. "Do you see this?" Krass hissed, stabbing a claw toward the happy horror show. "She's glowing. Glowing. That's a biochemical response. He's altered her metabolism." "He gave her a fruit bar," muttered Kaela, clearly reconsidering her entire life path. "This is sabotage," Krass snapped. "He's interfering with natural selection. He's disrupting the social order." Meanwhile, at the eye of the storm, Jet took another bite of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich, totally aware of the eyes boring into him. Kaela was cautious, her voice low. "You're being watched. I'm being judged," Jet corrected with a smile. "Big difference. One implies curiosity. The other means I'm officially on the Lizard King's burn list." "Krass VTR is a third-cycle legacy," she warned. "His family helped fund the Apex Genetic Archives." "Cool," Jet said, unbothered. "My family helped invent memes. So, cultural giants all around." Kaela blinked, uncertain. "What's a meme?" "Long story," Jet said. "Short version. Emotionally weaponized sarcasm. Humans are really good at it." Suddenly, a shadow loomed. A sharp clicking sound punctuated the air like a metronome of menace. Jet didn't need to turn. He knew who it was. "Here comes our scheduled disappointment." Crass, flanked by two fellow Dravari, Zul and Hex, marched up to the table, their scales a full-blown crimson cascade. He stopped 2 feet from Jet, posture perfect, spine tall, voice laced with condescension. Human. Lizard. Kaela tensed. Jet didn't. He chewed slowly, purposefully, and made a show of licking his thumb clean. He even made a satisfied noise. Crass ignored the bait. Your behavior is disruptive. This institution functions on the merit of species adapting to challenge. Not handouts. Not a handout, Jet replied. More like nutritional first aid. She was dying. I gave her apricots. You undermine the entire purpose of the Apex method, Crass hissed. We do not accommodate weakness. Funny, Jet said. That's exactly what you're doing now, accommodating your fragile ego. Hex growled. Zul looked personally offended by Jet's chewing technique. Kaela tried to intervene. Crass, this is unnecessary. No, this is protocol, Crass said, silencing her. You were failing to meet minimum physiological standards. The solution was not assistance. It was withdrawal. So you'd let her starve to protect your syllabus? Jet asked, dropping the smirk. His voice dropped too, just enough to cause a few eavesdroppers to lean in. Crass's lip curled. It's not about starvation. It's about standardization. Right, Jet replied dryly. Because your universal standards worked so well that one of your students was wasting away in front of everyone, and your response was Darwinian applause. Gasps rippled through the room. Jet went on. Tell me, Crass, did you test the food on every species here before declaring it the standard? Or did you just assume that what works for you works for everyone else? Crass's scales flashed warning orange. That's what I thought, Jet said. Then he stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Crass expected him to flinch. Instead, the human closed the inch of height difference by sheer attitude. Jet wasn't taller, but he felt bigger. You're not angry because she's eating, Jet said. You're angry because I proved she shouldn't have had to adapt to suffering just to meet your approval. The cafeteria was frozen. Even the noise-canceling drones paused. Then, click, click, click. Another set of footsteps approached. Professor Tevin. Oh no, a hush fell. Crass immediately straightened into teacher's pet mode. Tevin's 4 eyes scanned the scene. Her voice, when it came, was cool enough to lower room temperature by a few degrees. What is the purpose of this confrontation? Professor, Crass said smoothly. We were discussing the dangers of cross-species interference. The human's actions undermine the Apex method. I see, Tevin said, then turned to Kaela. Student Kaela, is it true you were unable to consume standard Apex nutrition? Kaela nodded. Yes, Professor. It contains calcium boronates, which bind to Emberian nutrient receptors and cause slow starvation, Tevin finished. Kaela blinked. Tevin turned to Jet. And you addressed this? I filed a report. Yesterday, along with a chemical compatibility chart between Earth and Emberian diets. I cited code 14.3 of the Apex Nutrition Mandate. Tevin arched an eyebrow with all 4 eyes. The section that requires proactive intervention in the case of dietary harm? Yup, Jet said. Footnoted 2. Tevin folded her hands. Impressive. I forwarded your analysis to the Apex Council. Effective immediately, new dietary protocols will be introduced for physiologically incompatible students. Congratulations, student Sorrin. You've enacted policy change with fruit. Jet gave a mock bow. I do try. Crass, Tevin said, turning, her tone now harder than titanium. You will submit a 5,000-word dissertation by week's end on the ethical implications of nutritional homogeny in interspecies institutions. Title: When Standard Kills. Crass's scales turn a flat, humiliating gray. Yes, Professor. Tevin nodded and left, her robe sweeping behind her like a curtain call. Jet sat back down. Kaela stared at him. You knew all that would happen? Jet shook his head. Not even a little. I thought I'd get expelled. Or stabbed. Possibly both. You risked expulsion. For me. Jet shrugged. Where I'm from, we don't let people suffer when we can help it. It's not heroism. It's just Earth 101. She looked down at the half-eaten apricot in her hand, then up again. This will be remembered, she said softly. In Emberian culture, Food sharing is sacred. A trust ritual. You're now clan bonded. Jet blinked. Wait, is this like a blood oath situation? Because I am not cutting my hand in a cafeteria. Kaela smiled. For the first time, her glow shimmered golden. Relax. It's just symbolic. You are now officially my friend. Jet grinned. Cool. I always wanted to be friends with a radioactive lava elf. If Jet Sorrin had learned anything from being human in a school designed by bureaucratic jellyfish and genetically polished lizards, it was this. Rules didn't break themselves. You had to smash them, preferably with style. The Apex Institute of Unified Intelligence didn't do style. It did centuries-old structure, meticulously upheld tradition, and a final exam called the Xenoscientific Practical, a misnamed academic horror gauntlet that made Earth's med school look like summer camp. The exam was infamous. Each student faced a solo simulation, an unknown alien ecosystem, layered with moral dilemmas, cross-species biological anomalies, and often, at least one near-sentient fungus bent on assimilation. You were judged not only on knowledge, but on your species-specific capacity to adapt, respond, and survive under pressure. Historically, humans failed spectacularly. Emberians had never made it far enough to even try, which made what Jet and Kaela were about to do completely illegal in spirit, if not in letter. 2 nights before the exam, the library hummed with stress and caffeine. Kaela and Jet were surrounded by digital screens, floating diagrams, and enough open data tablets to flag them as a potential terrorist cell in most peaceful societies. Jet pinched his brow. Okay, explain this again. The Nexian trachea bends. Why? Kaela didn't look up. Because they replaced their lungs with synthetic air sacs during the oxygen collapse of year 3091. It's partially aesthetic. They like to hiss when nervous. Jet groaned. Alien biology was invented just to humiliate me. No, Kaela corrected. It was invented by evolution and made worse by committees. He smiled at that. She was getting better at sarcasm. He was corrupting her nicely. Then she paused, finger hovering over a diagram. I've been thinking, she said carefully, this exam is designed to simulate reality. But reality rarely demands individual action. Real fieldwork is collaborative. Jet looked up. You're proposing cheating. I am proposing accuracy. Kaela replied with Emberian precision. There is nothing in the exam rules that forbids teamwork. It is simply untraditional. Jet blinked, then leaned back. You want to take Apex's sacred solo test and turn it into a group project? Kaela nodded. I'm listening. The next day, Jet marched to the administrative center like he'd been dared by the entire species of Earth. The building was a gleaming oval of translucent stone, surrounded by humming security fields and the disappointed ghosts of every student who had tried to challenge the system and failed. At the front desk stood Professor Tevin, the quadruple-eyed queen of academic justice. Jet bowed slightly. Professor, we'd like to request a procedural modification. Tevin blinked all 4 eyes in perfect rhythm. To the most important exam in Apex history? Yes, based on reality, and also petty rebellion. Continue. Jet explained. Collaborative fieldwork, diverse problem-solving, biochemical advantage layering. She listened, arms folded. Kaela stepped forward. We believe we can demonstrate the superior outcome of interspecies cooperation, but only if we're allowed to function as a unit. Tevin said nothing. Then, finally, she muttered, You two are profoundly annoying. Thank you, Jet said. We work hard at it. Exam day arrived with all the subtlety of planetary re-entry. Students filed into the simulation dome, a massive glass and steel auditorium suspended above the Apex Gardens. Inside, hundreds of species prepared to be mentally obliterated in isolated pods, each a customized hell based on cultural data and neural profile scans. Above them sat the real show, the observation gallery, packed with officials from every faction of the Andromeda Convergence, including the one, the only, High Chancellor Yellow. Jet spotted the Chancellor immediately. The Nexian Elder floated like some serene prophecy in silk. If wisdom had a wardrobe, it was Yellow's. Remind me, Jet whispered to Kaela, why this guy terrifies me. Because he's old enough to remember when black holes were theories and powerful enough to erase your planet from the syllabus. Right? Got it. As students filed toward their pods, Kaela and Jet moved away from theirs, toward Professor Tevin, and then past her, right to the middle of the dome. Tevin followed. "What are you doing?" She hissed. "Starting a precedent," Jet said. "Potentially a riot," Kaela added helpfully. At that moment, 3 more students joined them. A crystalline Denvar named Crix, a time-dilated Cronton named Tilo, and to everyone's shock, Vila, former mean girl, excration, newly self-aware. The room shifted. Murmurs spread. What is the meaning of this? Demanded a voice, oily and outraged. Enter Crass. His scales were already flashing red. His fronds fluttered like offended royalty. Behind him stood a small army of traditionalists, uniforms spotless, egos louder than their boots. "They are attempting to sabotage the exam," Crass declared. "This is mutiny." "No," Kaela said evenly. "This is what the real galaxy looks like." Jet turned to the gallery and raised his voice, addressing everyone. "Here's the problem," he said. "You test individuals in isolation to see who's the smartest. But when a planet collapses, or an alien virus mutates, or a culture misinterprets a first contact signal, no one solves that alone. You send teams, diverse teams, species with different strengths, weaknesses, perceptions." He turned toward Chancellor Yellow. "We want to test that. Let the traditional exam proceed. But let us try a collaborative simulation. Not because it's easier, because it's real." The hall was silent. Then the Chancellor stood. His voice flowed like carved stone. "I accept." Gasps. Crass exploded. "You're validating chaos." "No," Yellow said, calm as a glacier. "I am validating possibility." They were moved to a different chamber, one designed for joint simulations. 15 students joined them by choice. 11 different species. Some barely spoke the same language. Within minutes, it was chaos. Tilo was processing time in quadrants. Crix was singing data in harmonics. A Vossian named Turn tried to lick the interface, apparently standard protocol, where she came from. Jet stood in the middle of it all and shouted, "Okay, we need a translator, a tactician, a tech whisperer, and someone to keep me from screaming." Kaela raised her hand for that last one. The simulation began. A planetary crisis, gravitational anomalies threatening tectonic destruction, a population of 13 million, biodiverse ecosystem, political tensions, unknown variables. The traditional students, Crass included, opted for mass evacuation. Efficient, cold, calculated. Jet's team? They panicked. Then they improvised. Kaela discovered the anomalies were artificially induced. Crix calculated the resonance frequency to destabilize them. Vila remembered old Vidari terraforming equipment that could deliver the pulse. Tilo ran a 3-minute operation in 0.3 seconds. Jet coordinated like a conductor of barely coherent brilliance. When it ended, the AI announced, "Team preserved planetary integrity, 99.2% population retention, cultural continuity intact. Simulation success, maximum." They had saved everything. The other students had saved lives, but lost the world. The gallery erupted in quiet gasps and not-so-quiet debate. Chancellor Yullo rose again. "In this chamber," he said, "the future debated itself. And today, that future became real." He paused. "We will not abandon tradition. But for now forward, Apex will offer a collaborative track in xenoscience. One that tests not just intelligence, but compatibility, communication, synthesis, empathy." Crass's fronds drooped. Jet turned to Kaela. "We just hacked academia." Kaela's glow pulse gold. "And we didn't even get detention." The word historic gets thrown around too easily, by news anchors, by politicians, and especially by bored Apex students trying to impress during oral exams. But no one, no species, no department, no old council member sipping mineral water in the Apex observation gallery could deny what had just happened. A bunch of low-tier students, led by a sarcastic human and a glow-in-the-dark Emberian, had walked into the most rigid institution in the Andromeda Convergence and not only challenged the rules, but rewrote them, live, in front of the galaxy's academic aristocracy. The xenoscientific collaborative experiment, as it was already being called, hadn't just passed a test. It had annihilated the assumptions behind the test. And now the Chancellor had stood up. And when Chancellor Yullo of Nexus stands, galaxies listen. He walks slowly to the center of the simulation floor, the hem of his silver-etched robes whispering against the tile like a history book being written in real time. His facial ridges glowed softly, an involuntary signal of deep contemplation in Nexian physiology. Students from every simulation pod had now gathered. Faculty whispered. Journalists hovered like sharks in zerograph. Even the Dravari delegation, typically too proud to be caught reacting to anything below the level of a supernova, looked visibly shaken. Jet leaned toward Kaela. "How much trouble are we in?" "Possibly none," she whispered. "Or galactically enormous amounts." "Great," Jet muttered. "I love binary outcomes." Then Yullo spoke. "In my 200 years of public service," he said, his voice slow and deep like the hum of tectonic plates, "I have seen many brilliant minds, many brave experiments, and many dangerous ideas." He paused. "What I witnessed today was all three interwoven. No one blinked. No one dared. This team," Yullo continued, gesturing to the still glowing Kaela and Jet's ragtag coalition of misfit overachievers, approached a problem from angles no single species would have imagined alone. They fused perspective with methodology. They did not just pass the exam. They altered its purpose. Yullo's eyes shifted toward the traditional students, standing stiffly behind Crass, who was now visibly regretting every breath he'd taken since mocking the human sandwich. To those who completed the standard simulations, Yullo said, "Know that your results were admirable. Your protocols were clean, your survival rate strong. No one questions your ability." A polite, obligatory nod rippled through the room. Crass raised his chin slightly, attempting to salvage an ounce of dignity. Then Yullo turned back to Jet's team. "But this group preserved not only life, but continuity. They detected manipulation, prevented collapse, and protected culture, language, and history. Their result was not evacuation, it was salvation." The silence after his words wasn't empty. It was dense. It held realization, resentment, and something scarier, respect. Yullo looked to the Chancellor's seat in the gallery, then back down to Professor Tevin, who had been silently watching the exchange with her usual expression of unimpressed genius. "I propose," Yullo declared, "the immediate creation of a formal collaborative xenoscience track at the Apex Institute, equal in prestige, rigor, and accreditation, designed for integration, structured for synergy." Tevin blinked her 4 eyes. "Just once." "Approved," she said, like someone checking off a shopping list. Crass stepped forward. "High Chancellor, with all respect," he began, already sweating through his neck fronds, "this threatens the meritocratic foundation of Apex. Collaboration may be useful in theory, but it dilutes personal excellence. You cannot reward teamwork at the cost of individual supremacy." Yullo didn't even blink. "I do not propose replacing the traditional track," he said. "I propose evolution, not through eradication, but through expansion. If your tradition cannot withstand the existence of an alternative, then perhaps it was too brittle to begin with." Mic drop. Crass stepped back. Jet, arms folded, whispered to Kaela, "Did he just drag an entire culture using diplomacy?" "Yes," Kaela replied. "That's a Nexian power move. The polite version of a decapitation." Yullo nodded toward Professor Tevin. "You will begin development immediately. Student input will be essential. I recommend appointing a diverse committee." Tevin bowed. "Already compiling names, Chancellor." Jet leaned back. "We just made the school less awful. That's weirdly satisfying. You've changed the educational future of 12 sectors using peanut butter and sarcasm," Kaela replied. "You should feel very accomplished." Then someone unexpected stepped forward. Vila, the ex-mean girl, once loyal to Crass, now holding a glowing data crystal. "I have something to contribute," she said. Crass looked like he had been shot with a tranquilizer dart. "Vila, what are you doing?" "Rewriting my species stereotype," she said flatly. She placed the crystal on a projection pad. Holographic streams of multispectral nutritional data, stress resistance modeling, and cross-species compatibility charts exploded upward like fireworks. This, she explained, is 50 years of suppressed research, conducted by Dravari students who were told their insights weren't compatible with Apex norms. Most of it was buried. Until now. Yulo tilted his head. You offer this freely? Vila nodded. Because it shouldn't have taken a human to point out what we already knew. That sameness isn't strength. It's stagnation. Gasps again. Several students, especially from conservative species, looked physically offended. Others leaned forward with raw admiration. Jet turned to Kaela. Okay, now that's satisfying. She nodded. Very. Professor Tevin snapped her fingers. You're on the committee, Vila. Report to my office tomorrow. Crass opened his mouth, then wisely closed it again. That evening, as the lights of Apex dimmed into twilight mode and the glass dome reflected the pale violet stars of Gliese, 9, Jet and Kaela stood on the observation deck overlooking the newly repurposed gardens. The campus had already begun redesigning itself, because Apex adapted fast when embarrassed at scale. One dome now served as a cross-species dietary hub. Another was being cleared for collaborative simulation labs. Jet had watched a third-year Grelic ask a Denverian for help on an ethics assignment. The end times were truly upon them. I still don't believe it, Jet said, staring into the dusky skyline. One lunch. That's all it took. No, Kaela said. One principle applied consistently. One act that refused to bend to a broken system. Jet chuckled. You're starting to sound human. Kaela turned, smiling faintly. And you're starting to sound like an Emberian. They stood in silence for a moment, watching as a group of students walked past below, different species, different skin tones, different languages, all talking, sharing food, sharing ideas. A week ago, that would have been scandalous. Now, it looked normal. Then a voice buzzed from Jet's data tablet. A message from Professor Tevin. Human, report to my office tomorrow. You're on the curriculum design team. Bring snacks. He showed it to Kaela. She nodded solemnly. We'll bring granola bars. It's time the galaxy tasted adaptation. Jet grinned. The Apex Institute had always looked futuristic, gleaming towers, sentient doors, surveillance plants that tattled on students for loitering. But 6 months after the collaborative track launched, it looked different. Not just newer, not just shinier. It looked alive. There were gardens now, real ones, full of edible flora from across 59 worlds, cultivated under multicolored domes. Outside the new unified dining quadrant, trees from oxygen-heavy biospheres shaded rest areas while sulfur lovers huddled under custom gas vents. Formerly exclusive dormitories had been redesigned with adaptive climate controls. Bathrooms had finally been updated to handle gelatinous species, multilimbers, and even Crontons who only existed at 3x the normal time rate. And the food? Gone were the beige cubes of interspecies malnutrition. Now, drone chefs prepared personalized meals, down to the enzyme. Sharing your lunch was no longer seen as disruptive. It was considered diplomatic foreplay. At the center of this revolution, standing on a balcony overlooking the transformation, were the two students who had started it all. Jet Sorrin of Earth. Still sarcastic. Still human. Now, with a laminated security badge that said Collaborative Curriculum Advisor, which he used mostly to get free coffee. And Kaela of Emberis. Once starving, now the most cited student researcher on cross-biological integration in Apex history. Her glow had deepened to a steady amber, signaling high health and moderate exasperation, thanks mostly to Jet. It still doesn't feel real, Jet said, sipping from a mug labeled Humans, now in 4D. Kaela nodded. It is real. The simulations, the policy shifts. The collaborative program has already spread to 9 other institutions. She gestured toward the gardens. Even the cafeteria was redesigned using your original fruit bar as a biochemical template. Jet smirked. Glad my peanut butter bar made Galactic history. Now if only someone would name a building after me. They did, Kaela said. It's the Waste Processing Annex. You're very popular among sanitation engineers. Jet laughed. Fitting. A soft ping interrupted their banter. A hollow message materialized between them, an invitation embossed with the seal of the Andromeda Convergence Summit. Kaela read it first. Her eyebrows lifted. They want us to speak. Wait, what? Jet choked. Like on purpose? Kaela tilted her head. They said, the human and the Emberian who restructured Apex shall address the assembly on applied empathy and academic reinvention. Jet blinked. That's the most academic way I've ever been called troublemaker. I'm honored. And nervous? Kaela asked. Oh, deeply, Jet replied. But that's where I shine. Right between panic and poor impulse control. She smiled. Then let's shine together. 2 weeks later, at the Andromeda Convergence Summit. Held once every 10 years, the summit was equal parts diplomacy, parade, and political therapy session. Delegates from over 300 member worlds gathered in a crystalline orbital facility the size of a small moon. Security drones, translation networks, and egos buzzed around like angry bees. And this year's keynote? Not a tenured planetary president, not a Nobel-class physicist, but 2 students. Jet Sorrin adjusted his stiff collar as they stepped onto the stage. Why are summit uniforms always made of emotional regret and synthetic itch? Because fabric evolved from bureaucracy, Kaela replied. 1,000 delegates stare back at them, some with curiosity, some with skepticism. A few, especially from conservative blocs, looked moments away from a diplomatic aneurysm. Jet took a deep breath, then spoke. When I came to Apex, I was told to observe, to adapt, to keep my head down, study hard, and not make waves. He paused. But one day I saw someone starving. Kaela stepped forward. I was that someone. My biology was incompatible with the standard diet. My suffering was labeled a test, an expectation, until it wasn't, Jet added. Until someone decided it didn't have to be. They told the story of cafeteria cruelty, of shared food, of bureaucratic defiance, of the exam that rewrote itself, of Vila and Tilo and the others who joined not out of strategy, but out of hope. We're not here to say humans are special, Jet said. We're here to say that every species is, if you stop long enough to listen. We didn't create a new system, Kaela concluded. We simply held up a mirror and asked, does this reflect what we claim to believe? The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly came applause. First from the back rows, then the front, then everywhere. And among those standing was Chancellor Yullo, smiling, quietly victorious. 1 month later, at Apex Observation Deck, Jet and Kaela stood where it all began. Below them, students mingled freely, Dravari discussing climate modeling with Jalari, Grelix swapping stories with Denvarians, humans teaching Emberians to roast marshmallows. Kaela watched it unfold with an almost wistful expression. You know, she said, our story is being taught in first-year ethics classes now. Jet looked over surprised. As what? Proof of moral excellence or proof that no one reads the cafeteria manual? She smiled. As evidence that systems change when enough people choose discomfort over convenience. Jet leaned on the railing. I still think it started with lunch. And ended in policy, she replied. They stood in comfortable silence until Kaela reached into her satchel and handed Jet a small, sealed container. What's this? My homeworld's version of trail mix. We call it Australis. You made me try your food. It is time I return the gesture. Jet opened it and grinned. Smells like minerals and something vaguely radioactive. I love it. Kaela extended her hand. From one species to another. In friendship, Jet bumped fists with her. In defiance. They both laughed. Below them, a first-year student cautiously handed a shimmering Vossian a granola bar. The Vossian blinked all 3 eyes, sniffed it, and smiled. Look, Kaela said. It's happening again. Jet nodded. Good. Let it keep happening. Then he pulled a marker from his pocket and scribbled something on the railing. Kaela squinted. It started with, come eat with me. She smiled. And somewhere, deep in the administrative databanks of Apex, an algorithm flagged it as graffiti, then paused, and archived it under foundational moments.